You know, I still can't decide if cartoons stop making sense when you're high or if that's the first time they actually start making sense. But I feel cartoons get real weird when you're high. Not weird in a bad way, though. Weird in a, why does this suddenly make emotional sense kind of way. I was sitting watching TV earlier, absolutely baked. I was watching cartoons, and I had this moment where I realized cartoons might just make way more sense when you're high. Not less sense, more. And honestly, I feel like that should be a little concerning, but it's not. And then I start realizing most cartoons are basically just tiny animated existential crises. And somehow that became comforting. So this episode, we're talking about cartoons, why they hit different when you're high, and why some of the deepest thoughts you'll ever have might come from a drunk scientist, a talking teddy bear, or a dysfunctional alien family. And that alone made me start wondering if cartoons were ever really made for kids in the first place. I mean, you ever notice something strange about cartoons? They don't care about reality. Not at all. Gravity is optional. Logic is flexible. Consequences are temporary. A character can fall off a cliff, be flattened into a pancake, or inflate like a balloon, and then stand up and keep talking like nothing ever happened. When you're a kid, that shit's just funny. I don't care who you are. But when you're high, that starts to feel, well, it starts to feel familiar. Because when your brain slows down, when the noise quiets, when life stops rushing you forward, reality starts feeling less rigid, less permanent, less serious. And suddenly, the idea that everything resets, that consequences fade, that meaning might just be optional, it doesn't feel so ridiculous. It feels honest. And that's where we're going this smoke session. We're getting into why cartoons start feeling weirdly honest the moment your brain finally slows down enough to really see them. So if you got some rolled, settle in. And if you don't, settle in anyway. And to be honest with you, I do think cartoons are probably better high. But that's just me. Understand, cartoons are the only form of storytelling where reality has zero fucking authority. Physics optional, logic negotiable, time irrelevant. Characters die and come back. Buildings explode and reset. Entire worlds collapse. And the next damn episode starts like nothing ever happened. And when you're high, that shit feels normal. Because cannabis loosens your grip on how things are supposed to work. Your brain stops rushing. You stop trying to optimize everything. You stop forcing meaning onto every damn moment. And suddenly, you're open. Cartoons thrive in that openness. They don't ask you to believe something realistic. They ask you to feel something honest. And honesty doesn't always make sense. That's why dumb jokes feel deep. That's why chaos feels meaningful. That's why you'll laugh at something ridiculous and then immediately start questioning your own existence. Cartoons don't pretend life makes sense. It admits it doesn't. And weed lets you sit with that without needing every fucking answer. So here we go. Let's get into it. Let's start with the obvious one. Rick and Morty, my favorite, especially the early seasons. That was lightning in a bottle. Rick and Morty isn't funny despite being dark. It's funny because it is dark. The show looks you straight in the fucking eye and says, nothing matters. The universe is infinite. You're microscopic. Your problems are fucking temporary. And then right after telling you all that, the show kind of just shrugs and goes, so now what? Because if nothing really matters, then maybe you stop being so afraid of every little choice. There's something freeing about that. That thought lands different when you're high. Because weed puts you in that reflective space where you replay your life. Moments you regret, moments you nailed, moments that could have gone either way. And suddenly the multiverse, well, let me tell you, the multiverse doesn't feel like science fiction. It feels possible. Like somewhere out there, another version of you just might exist. Maybe they're thriving. Maybe they're struggling, but they're there. Rick is intelligence without meaning, while Morty is meaning trying to survive. And that fucking tension feels painfully human wrapped in a burp. And the deeper part, we all know Rick is miserable because when you understand everything, you stop believing in much of anything. That's the dark side of awareness. The more patterns you see, the harder it becomes to pretend life is simple. And weed does that too, not by making you smarter, but by making you pay attention. And once you start noticing things, you can't really go back. Once you start noticing that kind of stuff in animation, you realize some of the darkest shows are hiding underneath the brightest colors. That's what makes Solar Opposite so weird, because on the surface, it looks like bright colors, silly aliens, fast jokes. But let me tell you, underneath this show is ruthless, especially the wall. It starts as a joke, tiny humans trapped in a terrarium, but then it becomes something else, a society, limited resources, power struggles, religion, violence, control. And suddenly you're sitting there realizing this tiny civilization inside a glass box, it's basically just human history. And the most uncomfortable part, they don't even realize how small their world is. To them, it's everything. From our perspective, it's microscopic, which when you're high, it's not the direction you really want to let your brain go to at midnight. That's going down a rabbit hole that you'll never climb out of. I mean, think about it. What if we're inside our own version of that wall? Once your brain starts going down roads like that, trust me, you're going to need something dumber afterwards. That's where Family Guy comes in. Because Family Guy doesn't care about meaning. Family Guy just throws chaos directly in your face. You see, you don't choose Family Guy. Family Guy happens to you. You open YouTube. You watch one clip, then another. And suddenly, this is a true story. It's 4 hours later. Understand, high? My brain isn't tracking time. It's following stimulation. Family Guy is stream of consciousness humor. No continuity, no consequences, just chaos, which mirrors the high mind perfectly. One thought, another thought, something random, something offensive, maybe something brilliant. 1 minute you're laughing, the next minute you're weirdly invested in whatever insane thing is happening. And somehow you'll keep watching. You'll even probably catch yourself psychoanalyzing Stewie Griffin at like 1:30 in the morning. Yet, I'm pretty sure we can all agree that's a lot healthier than doom scrolling. And I know this probably sounds insane, but I swear, sometimes when your brain finally slows down, you start noticing weird little truths in random shit. Or maybe being high just makes me overthink cartoons. That's also a possibility. But there's something animation does better than almost anything else, and it's exaggerate the truth. You see, live action tries to imitate reality, but cartoons stretch it. And when you stretch something far enough, you start seeing its core. If Rick is exaggerated intelligence, then Bob's Burger is exaggerated family chaos, and Ted is just exaggerated impulse. And that exaggeration reveals something real. Weed does something similar. It amplifies perception. Colors feel brighter. Music feels deeper. Thoughts feel louder. Cartoons exaggerate reality, while weed exaggerates experience. You put them two together, and suddenly the world feels slightly rearranged. Once you start noticing that stuff, you also start realizing which shows actually feel comforting. Not because they're smarter, but because they feel more honest. And that's Bob's Burgers for me, because it doesn't try to impress you. It doesn't shout. It doesn't flex. It doesn't try to be edgy. It just fucking exists. It feels like emotional comfort food. The Belchers struggle. They fail. They argue. They're chaotic. But underneath everything, they love each other. For some reason, that stuff starts hitting a little harder. The little moments, the awkward kindness, the way they still show up for each other, even when everything's a fucking mess. Sometimes chaos and love live in the same damn house, which brings us to shows that feel completely unhinged, but somehow still make sense even when you're high. That's Gumball. Gumball is chaos refined. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't slow down. It doesn't even care if you're keeping up. 2D characters, 3D characters, live action backgrounds, styles constantly shifting. It's fucking sensory overload. But high, it somehow clicks because it feels like someone took every cartoon ever made, took the internet, took the memes, nostalgia, childhood, and threw it all into a blender and hit cosmic. But hidden inside that chaos, there's truth. Modern life, at times, can feel like that as well. Too much information, too much noise, everything happening at once. Gumball just turns that feeling into something funny, and it's genius. All right, so let's recap. At this point, we've got Rick and Morty making you question existence, Solar Opposites making you paranoid, Family Guy completely frying your attention span, Bob's Burgers emotionally healing you, and then there's Gumball feeling like a panic attack disguised as a children's show, which honestly, it just leaves us one honorable mention because technically, Ted isn't even a cartoon. But I think we all know spiritually, it absolutely is. Head is impulse, that unfiltered voice in all of our heads. Head is basically that part of your brain that says the thing you probably should have kept to yourself. Understand, when you're high, you start realizing that voice is always fucking there. The one that says something completely reckless, but every once in a while accidentally tells the truth. Maybe that's part of why cartoons hit so differently once you get older as well. Because at some point, you stop watching them. You start seeing yourself in them. Where you were, the couch, the TV, Saturday morning, cereal going soggy because you were too locked in. Back then, cartoons were just cartoons. Now, we realize they were teaching us something. Maybe not directly, but absolutely sideways, about chaos, friendship, failure, absurdity, just that life makes no fucking sense. Maybe the reason they hit differently now is because life finally caught up to what those cartoons were actually talking about. I mean, you ever get so high watching old cartoons that suddenly you remember exactly what your living room smelled like when you were a kid? The couch, the TV glow, the sound of the dishes in the kitchen. It's weird how fast your brain can travel when something unlocks a memory. There's a moment that happens sometimes. You're watching something ridiculous, a blue cat, a drunk scientist jumping universes, an alien family destroying Earth by accident. And suddenly you stop laughing because in that moment, you realize something. You realize these worlds aren't that different from ours. I mean, people still chase power. People still want love. People still try to understand why they're even here. Of course, the costumes are different. The rules are different. But the questions are exactly the same because cartoons don't lie. They just exaggerate. And exaggeration is truth turned up. Weed helps you see that life is ridiculous, that meaning is flexible, that maybe laughter is the most honest response we have. And maybe that's why cartoons hit so hard when you're high. They give you permission to stop taking reality so damn seriously. Because sometimes the strangest stories are the ones that show us who we really are. Sometimes the best way to see the world clearly is to look at it a little fucking sideways. Maybe the universe would make more sense in cartoon form. You never know. So yeah, that's my list. The cartoons that somehow feel more real the longer you sit with them. But I want to hear yours. What do you watch when you're high and trying to feel human? Hit me up on the website, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you hang out. Because half the fun of this show is realizing other people's brains go to weird fucking places just like mine. And if you want to keep hanging out, everything's over at thirdeyehighpodcast.com. We got full episodes, the Stay Third Eye High blog, and all the extra thoughts that don't always make it into the episodes. So until we spark up again, until next time, stay curious, stay lifted, stay third eye high.